Recording.
Thank you very much. So, hello and welcome to the Forsyth County Democrats presentation on guns, harm reduction, and responsible gun ownership. My name is Melissa Klink, and I'm the chair of the Forsyth County Democrats. Christine is our secretary, and Duke is one of our dedicated community members. First, I would like to begin by stating that myself, Duke, and Christine are the only people in this virtual setting who are partisan. Every other person you see in this virtual room is here in a nonpartisan capacity, representing various nonprofit organizations. None of these organizations ascribe to any particular political ideology, and all are welcome to join any of these organizations if they are interested. More information on how you can get involved with any of them will be provided throughout the presentation. Nelson Mandela said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. The more I learn about guns and gun laws, the more I realize there is so much to be learned. We know that talking about gun ownership can often end in people who may have very little accurate information on either side of the spectrum talking past one another. Though the comment section on any given day can be intriguing at times, it is rarely a good source from which to form your belief system. With so much misinformation and disinformation, I see the only path to clarity to be found in education. Education, information, and thoughtful, respectful dialogue is the foundation on which we find common ground and get to work leaving things better than we found them. Today, I would like to begin by thanking each of our panelists for joining us in an effort to do our part to increase education, advocacy, and awareness in terms of guns, harm reduction, and responsible gun ownership. Each of our panelists has a unique background and perspective in regards to guns and gun ownership, and it is my sincere hope that after you have heard from our panelists, that you will leave the presentation having gained more knowledge and insight to a topic that elicits a lot of strong emotions on all sides. Our panelists include Courtney Spriggs, who is the chapter leader for Moms Demand Action in Georgia. She has volunteered with Moms Demand Action since 2018 after the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Courtney was in law enforcement for close to 15 years as a deputy, investigator, supervisor, and community outreach specialist. Her husband is still in law enforcement and is a lieutenant at the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. They have lived in North Forsyth County since 2006. Douglas Jefferson is an accomplished shooter and the vice president for the National African American Gun Association. In this role, he has managed major initiatives of the organization, including the development of the new member orientation course, the upcoming national convention, development of the NAGA training curriculum, national outreach to organizations interested in working with NAGA. He began shooting in 2008 with a focus on self-defense and has completed a wide array of training covering handgun, rifle, first aid, gunshot wound and trauma treatment, force on force, situational awareness, and the legal aspects of self-defense, to name a few. Additionally, he has taken several courses in emergency management and preparedness due to his professional work in the field of emergency management and security. Douglas is an avid student of history and is known as the resident expert on the Black tradition of arms within NAGA. Charmaine Brown is a survivor fellow, a Moms Demand Action volunteer, and DeKalb chapter co-lead. He is also a Faith Council member and a Georgia Students Demand Action liaison. Charmaine lost her son, Jared Brown, in 2015 after being struck by a stray bullet 2 weeks prior to his 24th birthday. Tamiko Sinclair is a high school science teacher for the Atlanta Public School System. Gun ownership has been a tradition in her family for generations for hunting and protection. She joined NAGA in September of 2020 to be in a community of African American gun owners, hoping to meet owners who could teach her more about her firearm for herself and her family. Tamiko had absolutely no idea NAGA was a community that would offer her so much more. Since joining, Tamiko has gotten the opportunity to transition through the educational process and programs of NAGA, which include physical training, Black history, tradition of arms history, political engagement and education, and competitive shooting training. She now helps to coordinate the Youth Firearms Education Committee, which trains children in the safe uses of all firearms, storage, and suicide prevention. We also have youth panelists joining us today, and we will introduce them a little later on. Brooke and Kennedy of the Survival Sisters and Latayla Billingsley of Students Demand Action will close out our program. Courtney with Moms Demand Action Georgia will start us off with her presentation.
Thank you so much for having us today. As Melissa said, I'm Courtney Spriggs, the chapter leader for Moms Demand Action Georgia, and I've volunteered with moms since 2018 when a group of other Forsyth County moms, including a graduate of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, and I started a local group. I was in law enforcement for close to 15 years, much of that here in Forsyth County. My husband is still in law enforcement, is lieutenant at the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. We're both gun owners and have also witnessed the collective cumulative trauma that gun violence has on communities. Today, Charmaine, Latayla, and I are excited to not only share what Moms Demand Action is and what we do to prevent gun violence, but to have a discussion with a group that might hold different views than ours, but shares more commonalities than we might think. There's a lot more that we agree on than one might think at the offset. We agree that too many people in the United States, particularly in the African American community, are affected by gun violence. We agree that there are things responsible gun owners can do to help. And we know that we can prevent gun violence and protect the Second Amendment at the same time. We're so glad to be sharing this virtual stage with NAGA. We look forward to this important discussion, as well as any future conversation where organizations can find common ground to help make our communities safer. At the same time, we know there are issues we differ on, and that's okay, because dialogues like this are critical to understanding where each of us is coming from and approaching solutions that'll save lives. So thank you again, Melissa and the Forsyth County Democrats, for hosting this important discussion, to Douglas and NAGA for participating. It's our belief that these discussions, again, are vital to finding common ground, and in this case, the overall safety of the African American community. While mass shootings get a lot of media attention, the fact is 100 people are killed every single day by gun violence. Over 230 more are wounded. And many of those tragedies never make headlines, especially when we're talking about death by gun suicide and gun deaths in the Black community. I have a short presentation to share that goes over what the Moms Demand Action organization is. I'm going to share my screen after many unsuccessful tries. Give me just a second. Okay, I think we did it. Can everybody see it?
We can see your screen.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, so Moms Demand Action mission is to end gun violence in all forms in all communities. Additionally, we know that many people in this room have been impacted by gun violence, and we work to honor all victims and survivors of gun violence, and we thank you for being here. So we'd like to take a quick moment of silence to honor those injured or killed by gun violence. So Moms Demand Action is confident in our ability to reduce all gun violence, and we've seen outcomes that show our work is successful. We're Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, a nonpartisan grassroots movement working to reduce all forms of gun violence throughout the US. We're part of Everytown for Gun Safety, and along with Students Demand Action and the Everytown Survivor Network, we're the largest gun violence prevention organization in America with over 6 million supporters. Our purpose is to work together to decrease gun violence and increase public safety across our nation. In all of our meetings and activities such as this, we value diversity, advance equity, and demonstrate inclusion. We're a community. We're gun violence survivors, including victims and witnesses, change makers, and advocates who come together in partnership to work toward a future that is free from gun violence. And while we were founded by a mom, we're made up of moms, dads, uncles, sisters, anyone and everyone focused on reducing gun violence in America. We're strategic in our work, supporting evidence-based strategies to reduce gun violence in all its forms. We're a multifaceted organization that combats gun violence at the local, state, and national level, as well as advances cultural shifts supporting gun safety. As you learn about our movements, it's important to know the facts about gun violence. Everytown for Gun Safety, the organization which supports our grassroots work with Moms Demand Action, has a robust research team which helps ensure that we know the facts about gun violence and that we're equipped to work strategically on evidence-based strategies. So we'll learn a little bit about the myths and facts of gun violence, starting with firearm suicide. Though white Americans represent 77% of the US population, they are 87% of firearm suicide victims. It's also important to note that suicide makes up the mass majority of gun deaths, over 60%. Another myth is that all Americans are affected equally by gun violence. One of the many gun violence issues Mom Demand Action focuses on is the disproportionate impact of gun violence on Black Americans. Black Americans make up 13% of the US population, but 56% of firearm homicide victims. The causes of this disproportionate impact are multifold and specific to the history of our country. Our country's history of discriminatory policies have left Black and Hispanic people in segregated communities with high rates of poverty, unemployment, and incarceration. When concentrated, those factors are strong determinants of violent crime. This helps us understand why young boys and men of color living in impoverished, racially homogenous neighborhoods within cities are the leading victims of gun homicides and assault. So some of the work we do, we work on supporting gun laws. We work on the local, state, and federal level to pass and enforce gun laws that will save the most lives. Right now, our #1 federal priority is passing background checks and passing a federal red flag law. And this is a pivotal movement with a good chance to get this done this year. We work on safer gun storage, which Charmaine is going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation. We have an education program entitled Be Smart, which opens a dialogue for adults, parents, caregivers, and others to discuss the safe storage of firearms. SMART, S-M-A-R-T, stands for S, secure all guns in your homes and vehicles. M, model responsible behavior around guns. A, ask about the presence of unsecured guns in homes that you're visiting or your children are visiting. R is for risk, recognize the role of guns in suicide. And T is for tell your peers to be smart. And you can learn more about this program at besmartforkids.org, spelled out. More recently, we leveled up our work to support local allies around strategies that reduce homicides. This includes partnerships with gun violence interrupters and work around comprehensive community gun violence prevention. It's a newer area for us in addressing city gun violence, but one that we're actively engaged in at grassroots and organizational level. We also work to identify, support, and elect gun sense candidates. We launched a gun sense candidate program in 2018 for candidates who are willing to make gun safety a campaign priority. More than 3,000 gun sense candidates, both Republicans and Democrats, running for state and federal office, received our designation before the midterms, and more than 1,000 gun sense candidates were elected to office. Our 2020 gun sense candidate program launched last February, and we made our biggest impact yet on the 2020 elections in November. We create awareness. We do this through Be Smart for Kids, which I mentioned earlier. Wear Orange is our largest visibility event of the year. It's held in June. It was last weekend. And then Disarm Hate is another national campaign that centers around the fact that when hatred is armed, it can be deadly. And then the Everytown Survivor Network, which is a community of gun violence survivors, many of whom advocate for change publicly. We support survivors. The Everytown Survivor Network welcomes anyone who has personally experienced gun violence, whether they've witnessed an act of gun violence, been threatened or wounded with a gun, or had someone they know and cared for wounded or killed. This can include, but isn't limited to, gun homicides, gun suicides, domestic violence involving a gun, and unintentional shootings. The Everytown Survivor Network is a nationwide community of survivors working together to end gun violence. The network amplifies the power of diverse survivor experiences to put a human face on our nation's gun violence crisis. We connect survivors to build community, offer trauma-informed programs and trainings, and provide information on and referrals to direct services. The Everytown Survivor Network, along with Moms Demand Action and Students Demand Action, is a program of Everytown for gun safety. Students Demand Action. Speaking of students, youth advocates like LaTayla have been part of our grassroots work in youth advocacy for years. And in 2018, Students Demand Action launched. It's a national initiative created for and by teens and young adults to channel the energy and passion of high school and college-age students in the fight for gun violence. Students Demand Action volunteers work within their schools and communities to educate their peers, register voters, and demand common sense gun solutions to this national crisis. Thank you so much again for inviting us to be part of tonight's panel. I'll turn it back over to you, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Courtney, for that presentation and information. Please let me introduce Vice President of the National African American Gun Association, Douglas Jefferson. Douglas will be presenting on his organization.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight. I really appreciate a chance to share the stage with everyone. And I'll give you guys just a brief overview of what National African American Gun Association, or NAGA as the acronym is pronounced, stands for. So I'm going to share my screen here. I have a presentation for you guys. All right. All right, so this will just be a quick overview of our organization, who we are, what we do, what we're about. So National African American Gun Association. So the organization, it was founded in February of 2015 by the president of the organization and founder of the organization, Philip Smith. So Philip Smith, he's actually a native of California, moved to Georgia about 15 years ago due to a job change. And his entire life, he grew up in a home, no exposure to firearms. His parents were not, they were not gun owners, and they were not supporters, so to speak, of gun ownership, based on Phil's own words. So before he left California for a job change, his coworkers at the time wanted to take him to a range, and he had they'd asked him before, but he had put it off on several occasions. But he thought, what the heck, this is going to be the last time I'll see these guys, so let me go to the range with them. Well, he went to the range with them. Of course, they took him through a safety briefing, showed him how to operate the firearm, and he took his first shots, and he was hooked from then on. He really enjoyed himself, thought it was something that he wanted to participate more in. And when he moved to Georgia, being that it was a little easier for him to access firearms and use them at the range, he decided to take up that opportunity. Well, first thing that he noticed was that he didn't see a lot of other African Americans at the range. Often he was the only African American at the range. And so this sort of put an idea in his head that he wanted to develop an organization where African Americans could come together and shoot and fellowship together. Now, he often tells this story that he only thought he'd get maybe a dozen or so people joining the organization. But as you can see, here we are 6 years later. It's gone much further beyond just a dozen people. We're quite successful in continuing to grow. So the goal set out for the organization is to have every African American introduced to firearms use for home protection, competitive shooting, outdoor recreational activities. NAGA is a pro-Second Amendment organization focused on the preservation of the African American community through armed protection and community building. And NAGA welcomes people of all religious, social, and racial perspectives. So no matter whether you're Democrat or Republican, rich or poor, young or old, happy or grumpy, black or white, doesn't matter. If you support the goals of NAGA, then we welcome you. Mission statement for the organization is to establish a fellowship by educating on the rich legacy of gun ownership by African Americans, offering training that supports safe gun use for self-defense and sportsmanship, and advocating for the inalienable right to self-defense for African Americans. Education, training, safety, self-defense, advocacy for and by African Americans. So the organization started with its inaugural chapter, home chapter, being the Bass Reeves Atlanta chapter. It started in 2015. From that chapter, we've grown to over 130 chapters across 40 states of the US, over 40,000 members. We even have some members that have joined from abroad and from countries in South America, Central America, Europe, and Africa. Our organization participates in various initiatives and programs. One thing that we're really big on is history and really connecting people with the history of the African American community as it is concerned with the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment has a very, very strong history in the African American community, as there are many heroes and heroines that have used that right, along with many other rights, to protect and uplift the African American community. In fact, the Second Amendment is very closely tied with the right to vote. As once African Americans were emancipated from slavery, the first two rights that African Americans sought out as a group were to have the right to vote so that they can make their voices heard amongst their political process, and the right to bear arms so that they could protect themselves, as many of them living in the former Confederacy were still surrounded by those that did not believe that African Americans were and should have the rights of any other citizens in this country. So we very much focus on teaching that history. So we let African Americans know that This isn't something new that's happening as far as gun ownership. It's not something radical. It's not something out of place. It's something that has a very long and very proud history within our community of ethical, moral, and legal ownership of firearms to combat the far too often negative narratives that we see in the news and in fictional media. So we also we do that by focusing on firearm safety, safety first, safety last, safety always. Right. One thing about being a responsible gun owner is making sure you're safe with your firearm. So we talk about how to properly use it, how to properly store it, how to follow the law surrounding firearm storage, surrounding firearms usage. We focus on laws of self-defense and letting people know that, look, this is a tool, but it is a tool with a very, very niche set of situations which you're going to use it in. So this is something that, much like a parachute, when you need one, you really need one, right? Is not really a substitution. And so we talk about those niche situations and how the focus needs to be on conflict de-escalation, right? The best conflict to have is one that you never had to be involved in the first place. So learning to walk away, learning to not be engaged in any type of behavior or conditions, which could lead to some type of situation where you may need to defend yourself. Being aware of your surroundings, so not going certain places at certain times, making sure that you're making the best decisions possible to mitigate your chances, mitigate your risk of being involved in some type of situation where you need to defend yourself in the first place. Along with that, we have to talk about first aid, because if you're thinking that you might be in a situation where you have to defend yourself with a firearm, then we know that there is a possibility that you could get hurt, or maybe one of your family members could get hurt. And far too often, as we've seen in the African-American community, when you have these shootings, whether it's gang related, whether it's even police shootings, you have a lot of people that stand around and they don't do anything, not because they don't want to help, but because they don't know how to, right? How many lives could be saved if people had just basic first aid knowledge to help those around them, to help those that may have been hurt? So we focus on making sure that people are able to access that information, to learn those skills, because more likely than not, you're more likely to use that first aid knowledge than you are to use that firearm self-defense knowledge, right? You could be driving down the road, see a car accident. You could have someone that takes a fall, a slip and fall. Those skills are going to be universal. And it's not just making sure that you can protect yourself, but you're protecting your community, and you're making sure you're demonstrating that you're a good citizen, right? We talk about suicide awareness, because there is a problem in this country with folks committing suicide, particularly with firearms. And so we want to make people aware of that, right? Let them know that there are resources out there that can help them when it comes to dealing with suicide, whether it's thoughts that they may have or thoughts that they may think family members or friends may have, right? So being able to recognize those signs and being able to know information and resources that they can suggest to those folks to help them. We talk about laws of firearm ownership, laws of self-defense. And of course, you have to talk about youth instruction. We have far too many instances in this country where we have youth that, because they have zero exposure to firearms, they don't know anything about them. They don't know about safe handling. They don't know about going to get an adult. They end up finding firearms, often that may be improperly stored, and playing with them. And unfortunately, someone gets hurt, right? We don't want that to happen. We want youth to be empowered to know how to safely handle firearms. We want them to know the process of if they run into them, what they should do as far as telling adults. We want those parents that have children to know how to safely store those firearms, how to safely use them, and how to talk to their children about firearm safety, because these are tools that, they've been around for a long time. They'll be around for a lot longer, right? So we want to make sure that with any tool, with any responsibility, especially one as significant as Second Amendment, that we're taking that with the due seriousness that it should be afforded. So these are just some of the things that we focus on. We've got a couple pictures here of some of the instruction that you see. We are, as an organization, we're actually 60% women as far as our membership goes. Which is actually what's surprising us. You would think that, gun organization, you're going to have a bunch of guys, which, we have a lot of guys. I mean, 40,000 people is not a small number, but we do skew more towards a female membership than male membership. And then I want to leave with this picture of the book Negroes and the Gun, which is, if you're ever interested in really delving into that history, this is a great book to start at. If I were to teach a college level course talking about the Black tradition of arms, I would use this book because it covers everything from when our first enslaved ancestors were brought here in 1619, bringing us all the way up to present day. So that concludes my presentation, introducing the organization. I look forward to sharing some more information with you guys as this conversation goes on this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas, for that presentation and information. We will now move on to the question portion of the presentation. There will be no rebuttals, but a representative from both MOMS and NAGA will answer the same question in an effort to expand on the presentations they have just shared with us. Both of your organizations are involved in helping to create a culture of responsible gun ownership, including education on safe storage. Can you share some of the specific ways your organization advocates for this culture? Charmaine, we will begin with you.
Thank you. And again, thank you for having me. The gun violence prevention movement is personal to me. I joined Moms Demand Action in 2017, almost a year after losing my son, Jared. My husband and I were out of town on a weekend trip. We returned home and found a note left on our front door from the medical examiner's office stating to please call. Upon returning the call, we learned that Jared, our middle child and only son, had died. Upset and devastated, information to the Atlanta Police Department, who stated Jared had just gotten off work when he received a call from a friend inviting him to attend a barbecue. Shots were fired and he was struck and died instantly.
Hey, Charmaine, I don't want to interrupt. I just want to let you,
We're responsible.
you're breaking up just a little bit, babe. I didn't want to miss your story. So I just wanted to let you know you were breaking up. All right, go ahead and try to talk. Let's see if it.
So did you want me to start again? Or-
So you started breaking up when you said that there was a note on your door. If you would like to start from there. I just want to make sure everyone gets to hear your entire story.
Okay, thank you.
You're
We
welcome.
returned home and found a note left on our front door from the medical examiner's office stating to please call. Upon returning the call, we learned that Jared, our middle child and only son, had died. Upset and devastated, we wanted to know what happened to our son. We were given the contact information to the Atlanta Police Department, who stated Jared had just gotten off work when he received a call from a friend inviting him to attend a barbecue. As he was approaching the area, headed to the cookout, shots were fired and he was struck and died instantly. As a parent, I could no longer sit on the sideline. Millions of children and teens are spent, and it's our responsibility to keep them stored securely. Are stored securely.
Uh-oh.
How you doing,
We lose
Charmaine?
Charmaine.
No, I think she's coming back in. So Charmaine, we were able to hear the rest of your story. When you go into the next section, you might want to repeat that. So, but we were able to hear the rest of your story perfectly. And don't worry, you know, this is Zoom. This is not your fault. It's just technology. So, but we are working with you and we want to hear everything you have to say. And you can feel free, you can dial in if you want.
For keeping,
Let's try to dial in
can you
for,
hear me now?
yes, better.
You said yes.
Yes, ma'am.
As adults, we're responsible for keeping kids safe. As schools are letting out for the summer, millions of children and teens are spending a lot of time isolated from friends and extended family. Adults should always assume children and teens know where guns are stored, and it's our responsibility to keep them stored securely. An estimated 13 million households with children in the United States have at least one gun. Not all of these firearms are stored securely. Approximately 4.6 million children live in a household with at least one gun that is stored, loaded, and unlocked. And that's from before the pandemic and the recent spike in gun sales. We can prevent unintentional shootings by children by adopting secure storage practices. One study estimated that if half of the households with children that contain at least one unlocked gun switched to locking all their guns, 1/3 of youth, gun suicides, and unintentional deaths could be prevented, saving an estimated 251 lives in a single year. We have an education program entitled Be Smart, which opens the dialogue for adults, parents, caregivers, and others to discuss safe storage of firearms and take these simple steps. Secure all guns in homes and vehicles. Model responsible behavior. Ask about firearms in other homes your child visit. Recognize the role of guns in suicide and tell your peers to be smart. Thank you.
Very good. And we heard everything there. So thank you so much. I appreciate you running through that again for us. So thank you, Charmaine. Tamiko, I have the same question for you, and I can repeat it if you want me to repeat it. And Charmaine, just put yourself on mute for me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Miko. Thank you for having me. It's good to meet all of you all. And Ms. Brown, I really appreciate you sharing that story. It's a story we hear far too often, and we are really taking on the challenge of trying to do exactly what you were talking about educating people as to how we can get these, to make a change for that. For NAGA, the cornerstone of NAGA and why it actually exists is for safe gun safety and responsible gun safety. So for the other portion of that is just being able to educate people. And so for African Americans, that education is going to look a little bit different because of our history and because of even the stigma that is in the community. So for when we are going about our education, we use a more holistic approach. So when we say the words gun safety in NAGA, we're not only talking about just being able to physically handle your gun appropriately and even your storage. We're also talking about training, ongoing training. We're talking about law and legislation. Do you know the law in your state? Do you know the legislations going on? We are also talking about and enforcing the unique history behind our foundation and also our unique tradition of arms. So when we talk about gun safety, we are talking about and educating everyone in our community on that holistically, using all of that as a platform. The way that we actually do that is through something I like to call it NAGA University, because it actually is like a group of courses that new gun owners come through in order to become proficient in all of this. So there are, all of these courses are taught by certified safety range officers who have gone through training. We also have admin members in our organization who are actually practice law. So we utilize all of our membership, and we have 4 courses, if you like to say, that we send new members through. That first course is the new members orientation. The second course is actually the gun safety and marksmanship course. The third course is the marksmanship assessment. And then the fourth one is your actual training, hands-on training. Now, when we have new members that are going through these courses, as I said, we are developing them and educating them holistically. So when we talk about safety in those courses, these courses are cumulative and progress in their information. And so when we're giving them safety information. We're giving them first basic safety information so that they know the parts of their gun. They know how it operates, the functions, ammunition. We also go through a training on what are those 5 safety, gun safety laws. What are the gun safety rules or marksmanship rules? We do marksmanship proficiency and give feedback on educating on that. And we also have a training that they have to go through. And this training is ongoing monthly. And these trainings are even subdivided into groups where we have a group training where all the men, women, and even the youth can participate. We have a training specifically for the males. We have a training specifically for females. And we also have a training that's specifically for youth. And with that youth training, as you were stating, we definitely go through safe storage with the parent and the student, the plan they have in their house, and also suicide prevention. As far as that, the law and legislation, we also take them through all of Georgia law. Do they know Georgia law or the law in their particular state? Do they know their use of force laws there? Are they educated on what legislations are in place now and will be put into place or are proposed for the future? So all of that is in place. Also, we have ongoing education on that. We do have a committee that does ongoing education for law and legislation and actually engage our present local and state representatives on legislation and legislation going forward. When we talk about history and talk about that tradition of arms, we also give a progressive accumulation of information to our members because gun safety starts in the mind and it starts with your mindset. So it is pertinent that we give that background and help them to understand what this legacy is and how important it is and how to respect it and be responsible with it. So when it comes to, we do have a committee within our organization that also does ongoing trainings on the historical perspective and the distinctive Black history or tradition of arms also. With all of this put together, then we put together a course that not only are you learning in your home how to be safe and responsible and to store properly, you also are learning how to be safe and store responsibly and be aware of your surroundings when you are in your car. There's a large amount of guns, as you know, that are stolen from vehicles. And so they get into the hands of people who are doing a lot of this violence. So safe storage, of course, even at the level of being in your car. And then the last level, when you're carrying, if you're carrying, you should be able to proficiently use it safely, store it safely, be aware of your surroundings and be as safe as possible while that is on you. Okay, so that's exactly what we do in our organization as far as trying to make sure that we are educating the best, giving the best education to our new members.
Thank you so much, Tamika. So our next question begins with Douglas. What has been the impact of gun violence in America to you? And what solutions are you putting forward to reduce the impact of gun violence on Americans?
All right, make sure I'm off mute here. Okay. So the impact of gun violence to America, to me, the impact to me has been the impact that's been to all Americans. It's been a terrible, terrible symptom of some really complex issues that we have in society. I found out that the more that I learn about gun violence, the more that I find that there are these deeper connections to these very, very serious issues in our community. Courtney spoke on some of these earlier, but just to kind of lay them out, I mean, we look at violence happening in our communities. It comes from various different places. We have, the issue of poverty, right? You have people that are in situations where they're not able to take care of their family. They can't get access to quality education. They don't have access to non-predatory capital, so they can't start businesses. They can't send kids to college. They can't buy homes, right? You have people in these desperate situations, and people in desperate situations are going to do things that they wouldn't normally do. They're going to have shorter patience than they would normally have, and they're going to have fewer tools to resolve conflicts than the rest of us. And unfortunately, what that boils down to is seeing increased levels of violence, right? Another thing is mental health. And have people that have mental health issues, and not only do we stigmatize mental health issues as a society, but we don't offer a lot of resources for them either. Since about the end of the 1920s, you had a significant scaling back of the public resources that were available for mental health, and a mass stigmatization of mental health that exists all the way up to this day. So even when you have people that can recognize that they have issues, they're afraid to talk about them. They're afraid to reach out because they don't want to be judged. It can, sometimes cost them friendships. Sometimes it can cost them jobs, right? Because they may be looked at in a certain way, as if they're not capable, when all it is, they just need some help so that they can get back to where they need to be a good, productive, and citizen that can uplift the community just like everyone else, right? And then, of course, we can't avoid the issue of systemic racism that we've seen in this country, where you've had opportunities denied from African Americans, wealth stolen. You've had the instance of mass incarceration, a lot of that coming off of our horrible drug policy that we have in this country with the war on drugs. We have people, instead of treating people that have substance abuse problems, we put them in jail, we criminalize them, we turn them into second and third class citizens, essentially. Because once you get that felony record, you're extremely limited in opportunities that you take up. Many public resources such as housing, funds for education, even the ability to get certain business licenses, right, are taken away from a person once they have that felony record. Not to mention their right to vote, and also they get their Second Amendment rights curtailed as well, even if we're talking about something, a nonviolent felony, such as someone bounced a check, right? So you have all these hurdles and these barriers in front of folks. It leaves them with very little options. Now, that doesn't mean that folks shouldn't be held accountable when they make those choices, but we have to recognize that they're not making these choices in a void, right? We have to recognize that they aren't exactly having the best options to choose from. So as a society, if we really care about this, we've got to really buckle down and tackle these more complex issues, right? We have to look beyond just, particular tools that they may use, or that is important to the conversation. We have to make sure that we're looking at those deeper level issues if we really want to get long-term solutions to this problem. Some of the things we do in NAGA to really promote solving these issues, the issue of gun violence, is really looking at talking about those other issues that I spoke of. So obviously, we want to create a culture of responsible gun ownership through training, through knowing the law, through properly storing your firearms. We want to call for different reforms, such as reforms in policing. We have to look at the over-criminalization that's happening across the country, particularly to the African-American community. And we have to come up with a less punitive methods to address some of these social ills, instead of throwing everyone in jail, giving them these felony records, and then putting them in tough situations where they're going to be choosing from one bad choice or another, right? We need to improve resources that we have available for mental health. We part of our making people aware of the resource of mental health issues, and that there are resources available. The Commodore comes up that, it just seems like it's so sparse that there should be more. And so making them aware of that means that we can start engaging with, well, now that we recognize that there is a lack, then we can start talking about increasing it and what we need to do as far as advocacy to do so. And then, of course, we have to start looking at different restorative justice options. We have to look at ending the war on drugs and rehabilitating people instead of just incarcerating them. Right? We always talk about how jail is someone serving their debt to society, but it seems like that debt never ends, even when they get out of jail, even when they get back to the community, because something like 60% of people that go to jail are going to come back out to the community at some point. So we have to have a place for them to go. We have to have a way for them to reintegrate into society, because they are out here. They will be among us. They will be citizens again, and we need to make sure they have everything necessary to turn their lives around. So that's just my input on that particular question. I'm sure that there's a lot that we can agree on as a group, but I'm definitely interested in hearing other perspectives on this.
Thank you, Douglas. Charmaine, same question, please. And I believe Courtney would like to answer as well. After Courtney, I want to give Tamiko an opportunity to answer the question as well. I have to step away for just a second.
Okay. For me, it has had a lasting impact. As you noted, I stated earlier, after the loss of my son, it has definitely impacted our family tremendously. But to best address the gun violence crisis and the impact it has on children, we need to recognize its full toll. So shootings create ripple effects that affect an entire community, particularly where gun violence is frequent. Recognizing this community trauma is an essential step in addressing it and creating a safer future. So when we look at the term community trauma, it seeks to name an effect that many in the Black communities know to be ever present and deeply problematic. For Black Americans, trauma from gun violence combined with and is compounded by structural, historical, and intergenerational violence. The lack of access to opportunities is a key driver of gun violence, and the generations of policy decisions and underinvestment have led to disproportionate rates of gun violence in many Black communities. So among Black Americans, the gun homicide rate is 10 times higher than that of white Americans. And Black children and teens in the United States are 4 times more likely than their white peers to die by a firearm. So these disparities have roots in generations of policy decisions, and policymakers have an essential role to play in addressing them. In communities with disproportionate levels of gun violence, there is collective trauma in addition to hurt and suffering individuals experience. Understanding the ways that gun violence traumatizes an entire community is essential for developing successful responses. Everytown, researchers have spent months analyzing existing research on community trauma, speaking with experts and survivors, and then developing recommendations. So some of those recommendations for addressing community trauma include developing cultural affirming and equitable mental health resources, funding community-based violence intervention programs, investing in crime prevention through environmental design, also implementing restorative justice programs, along with expanding economic opportunities and holding law enforcement accountable to the communities they serve. One of the most immediate things that policymakers can do is ensure gun violence intervention programs have the financial resources they need to continue their life-saving work.
Thank
Now
you
I'll
very
turn
much.
it over to Courtney.
All right. Thank you, Charmaine. Go ahead,
Thanks,
Courtney.
Charmaine.
I'm sorry I had to step.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that plenty of Moms Demand Action volunteers are gun owners like me or live in households with guns. Of course, we have no issue with responsible gun ownership, but while coronavirus this past year spread sickness and fear throughout the whole world, families stocked up on staples like toilet paper, hand sanitizer, and dry goods. And in America, they also lined up to buy guns and ammunition. So for many of those, that might have been the first gun they had purchased. And they might be making the purchase without considering the risks that accompany gun ownership, including an increased likelihood of unintentional shootings, intimate partner violence, and gun suicide. Many of those sales happen at gun stores where they're required to run background checks. But it's important to remember that there's a whole online marketplace as well, where in many states you can buy a gun online with no background check and no questions asked. We've been working for years to pass laws requiring background checks on all gun sales, and we've been successful. More than half of Americans now live in a state that does require background checks. Still, the loophole in our law presents a danger for a lot of families. And regardless of where the sale is happening, I hope every purchaser is getting what they need to securely store their new gun too. We mentioned this earlier, but research shows that 4.6 million children live in America in homes with guns that are loaded and unlocked. Many of those kids are home from school, especially now as we head into summer. It's every parent's responsibility to keep those guns securely stored. A lot of kids, research shows, know where those guns are stored. So secure storage is particularly important with school being out for the summer.
Thank you very much, Courtney. Tamiko, go ahead with the same question. And I can repeat it. I know it's been a while since I said it.
Okay, it was the impact of gun violence.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, for me, I can speak on it. I want to speak on it from the perspective of just being a high school teacher in Atlanta Public Schools. What I've seen when these cases occur, especially with my students, We have relationships with our colleagues that are at the middle school level. I'm a high school teacher, so at the middle school level and elementary level, and these are close-knit communities. And when this gun violence happens and we look back on, and we are constantly trying to figure out what is the stop to this, what can end this. We also survey our students and have to, of course, give counseling to our students when things like this happen and it disrupts the entire community. It always comes all the way back to, and we can trace it all the way from top to bottom. It's a lack of resources. It's a lack of resources, lack of education, and lack of support in the community in which it's occurring in. And I can just leave it at that.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Our next question will start with Charmaine and Courtney. Nearly 2/3 of gun deaths annually are due to suicide. What efforts has your organization made in tackling this complex issue? And
Gun suicide is a preventable health crisis. Gun suicide claims the lives of more than 23,000 people in America every year, and addressing this crisis is critical to addressing gun violence. We know that the ongoing pandemic and the surge in gun sales and the severe, so nearly 2/3 of all gun deaths in the United States are gun suicide, and having access to a firearm triples someone's risk of death by suicide. Firearm suicide can be prevented. One of the most effective things that help prevent firearm suicide, including secure storage of firearms and waiting period legislation. Firearm suicide is devastating young Americans between the ages of 10 and 24, who have the fastest growing firearm suicide rates of any age group over the last decade. And youth suicide has increased every year since 2007. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people in the United States. Over the last decade, the firearm suicide rate has increased 61% among young Black people. COVID-19 created a perfect storm of risk. Can promote public awareness of secure storage and available resources, increase access to medical services such as mental health and suicide prevention, and also expand access to economic support, including unemployment benefits and subsidies to reduce eviction and foreclosures.
thank you so much. Lots of great information there. Courtney, you would like to answer the question as well?
Yeah, I'm just following Charmaine with some wrap up stuff. Yeah, and so that's another reason that our volunteers, again, are working to elevate the Be Smart message. I can't stress that enough. Right now in Cobb County, volunteers are spearheading an effort to get Be Smart posters, which outline those 5 gun safety rules in 10 Cobb County bus stations. Moms Demand Action volunteers also work with organizations like the Georgia chapter of American Academy of Pediatrics to talk about gun suicide as a public health issue. In 2018, that same chapter of American Academy of Pediatrics awarded a member of the Atlanta Be Smart group a Friend of Children Award for Be Smart. Thanks.
Thank you. And Tamika, did you want to say anything about that?
Sure. Well, as far as our organization goes, we do have, we use the resources that we have in our membership, and we do have mental health specialists that are in our organization, and we work with them, and they've created resources that we're distributing throughout the entire membership. We also have members that are being trained under stress management and suicide awareness. And we most recently have implemented a module in our program for our youth and parents, in which we do suicide awareness and stress reduction in the actual module. And we actually got an opportunity to actually do this this past Saturday, and we had a lot of feedback from parents as to this being a need and something that they are looking at. And we also had some parents that I think just being aware and knowing that the numbers, especially in the African American community, for teens have spiked. There needs to be awareness and there needs to be resources in place. Our mental health specialist has also put into place mental health counselors that for free and on a sliding scale that anyone can access if this is a need in the community. And I'll let, if Douglas, I know Douglas has, he's our VP, so he knows the big picture.
Yes, go ahead, Douglas. I'm sorry, I meant to start with you, but we went.
No problem. No problem. So Tamiko, she covered some of the programs that we're working on and pushing out to the membership. What we do a lot in the Atlanta chapter, we'll start programs in the Atlanta chapter, which we push out to members. So Tamiko, she's really spearheading this along with Colin Mapp, who's the chapter president of our Atlanta chapter. Two programs that we have specifically going on right now. One is already in place, and it's actually a public safety awareness campaign called the Protect What Protects You campaign. So that campaign is actually something we developed with another organization, working with another organization called the Firearms Security Alliance. They're a nonpartisan group that specializes in engaging gun owners to find solutions to reduce gun violence. And so the point of that campaign is to teach firearms owners the importance of securing their firearms from theft, particularly from theft from their cars, as something like 400,000 guns are stolen every year. And 80% of those guns are actually stolen from vehicles. So a large number of those guns are being stolen from cars, not from people's homes, not from stores, but from people's vehicles. And theft is the top source of guns that are used in crimes. So just really educating and developing a culture of safe storage of firearms, responsible storage of firearms would drastically cut down on the amount of unauthorized access to firearms and firearms used in crimes or any other type of unauthorized activity. So the campaign actually consists of a series of, we have social media posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, as well as short videos educating firearms owners on options that they can take to store their firearms in a secure manner in their vehicles. The second campaign they're working on is with the group called Forge. And Forge is actually the parent organization of Firearms Security Alliance. Now, Forge already has a campaign where they're working on veteran suicide awareness and prevention, but they're going to be working with NAGA in developing a campaign similar to the Protect What Protects You campaign, educating on and talk about prevention of Black teen suicide awareness. And we really want to tackle this because looking out there at campaigns that they're available for suicide awareness and even youth suicide awareness, there's not really anything that's targeted towards the African-American community. We feel there needs to be more focus on that, given the rise of teen suicides that we've seen amongst Black youth. So the committee was formed within our chapter to work on that. Tamiko was part of that committee. And we're going to begin this campaign later this year. We've started beta testing part of it. It was with the training that Tamiko was talking about and pushing that out amongst chapters. But we're looking forward to put together a large event where we engage all the chapters across the country, the chapter leadership, and really pulling ideas from them to see what is going to look best for a campaign and hope and trying to get that information this year. And by first of next year, really having that campaign out into the public so that we can make sure that our community is definitely aware of the number of suicides that we see in our community, what things can be done to prevent that, and how we can just really help to reduce the number of those lives that are lost. Because any effect that we can have on that, that where we can reduce that number of lives lost is going to be something that we're definitely on board with in doing. And it all starts with mindset. And that mindset, we've got to get into the heads of gun owners and make sure that they know what their role is in this and make sure they feel empowered in taking up that role and that they can make a difference.
Thank you, Douglas. I just want to say really quickly that it was impressive to hear from both organizations that you guys see a need you see that other people aren't filling that need, and you're working, creating space in your own organizations to fulfill that need. And I think that that's really inspiring, and I'm really glad that you all shared that with us. So we are going to introduce our team panelists. If any of you have been watching, I just want to go ahead and just apologize to my team panelists because they have been so patient. They've been on the call with us since 6:30. It's now 8 o'clock, and they have not got to say or do anything. So I understand that takes a lot of patience, and I probably owe them all dinner now. So I would like to introduce our team panelists. First, we have LaTayla Billingsley. She is a survivor, a Students Demand Action National Advisory Board member, Atlanta Community Students Demand Action Group lead. She lost her cousin when she was trying to leave a situation with an intimate partner. The Survival Sisters are redefining what family looks like when essential survival skills of life are passed down from one generation to the next. They have taken the responsibility of rebranding children and youth in the firearm, survival, self-defense, and bushcraft communities. They definitely understand the importance of the business, legal, and financial demands placed on their shoulders. The sisters strive to model self-confidence, self-reliance, self-resiliency, and self-preservation. As a group, they model teamwork, organization, leadership, and positive social interaction. The name Survival Sisters was simply created from the mere fact that they are blood sisters and they are into survival. Their names and ages are as follows. Brooke is 15, Kennedy is 13, Naomi is 12, and Charlie is 10. They never imagined that the video that they were doing to document family fun would take on a life of its own. They have an ever-growing social media presence. However, it's not always been that great. In the beginning, there was a lot of pushback from people in the firearm community because they were little girls in a traditionally male-dominated environment. Today, we have two of the Survival Sisters with us, Brooke and Kennedy. Can you tell us about what your experience with guns and the impact it has had on your life? And we will start with Brooke and Kennedy.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I would just like to say that I'm actually 16. My dad just always get our birthdays wrong.
And I'm
Oh, you'll have to blame your dad for that. He's the one who gave me this information. So 16 and 14. So now for the record.
Yes, firearms have impacted us as a family. It's able to bring us together in a way that we connect and also interact with each other. We do things we like.
What it has done for me is it's brought my family together in a way, and it's made us meet a lot of cool people, and it's always broke the curiosity. That's one thing that I have that's really, really strong that I'm thankful for. I don't have the curiosity of like, when I see something, I don't want to pick it up. I know how to handle a firearm and what to do with it, or handle a knife. It's never just, oh, I'm going to play with it. I know how to handle it, and it's just impacted me in ways where it brought me, and it's made me just thrive in a way, and even helped me even socially, like even at school, like my speeches and stuff like that. So
Yes, it helped us meet new people of different races, religions, and even genders that are actually nice. We never met a mean person towards us. We able to look at people and do things that we all like together. It's firearms, survival, things and skills and everything else.
and it's helped us as sisters bond and find out each other's weaknesses, which is something that we're really thankful for, that Brooke might have some strength that I don't have, and I might have some strength that she doesn't have. And it just makes us, even as a team, even more stronger than we already are individually.
Yeah, we balance each other very well.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing that with us. LaTayla, same question for you. Can you tell us about your experience with guns and the impact that it has had on your life?
So guns have impacted me in multiple ways, especially since I grew up in a generation where gun suicides, school shootings, mass shootings, and gun homicide in general are daily occurrences. However, the impact, as you stated earlier, is far more personal for me because I identify as a survivor of gun violence. When I was in 8th grade, while my peers were excited and preparing for what was going to happen, and once we finally got to high school, I was grappling with the fact that my older cousin, a mother of 2 kids, was shot and killed in Florida. And it made the reality of what it means to be a Black woman in America at the present time all the more apparent to me. And it was the fact that legislation like Stand Your Ground, it allowed an intimate partner to be able to shoot and kill my cousin Jasmine while she was trying to get away from them, and allow them not to get any adequate consequences for the action. That's why I'm here today, and that's why I do the work that I do, because honestly, in Georgia, there is no place for stand your ground, because as we've seen, it is dangerous and racist because it promotes armed vigilantism, and it allows people to shoot first and ask questions later, and has a disproportionate impact on the Black community. As we've seen with more popular cases like what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, and in lesser known cases like what happened to President Jasmine.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm so sorry for your loss, but I'm glad that you're here with us to share your story. All right. I would like to begin with LaTayla for this question. What's one thing you would change about guns in the United States and why?
If there were one thing I would like to change about guns in the United States, it would be the belief that only one piece of gun legislation would be able to solve every issue pertaining to the prevalence of gun violence in America. The issue and the topic of gun violence is very multifaceted. As mentioned before, there's gun suicide and mass shootings, but there's also domestic violence involving a firearm and hate crimes that become homicides and attempted homicides. Because there are so many different aspects relating to gun violence, one piece of legislation will not remedy everything. Common sense gun legislation also doesn't ensure that the root causes of gun violence, like poverty, housing inequality, and other systemic inequities in America and in American society, are combated or even addressed. And one piece of legislation may not even account for the ripple effect and the impact shootings cause to entire communities, especially those where gun violence is prevalent. And the recognition of this community trauma, like Ms. Charmaine said earlier, it is very important to take that into consideration when addressing gun violence and trying to create a safer future for the Black and Brown community and Americans as a whole.
Thank you so much for that well thought out answer. Very comprehensive. I appreciate your perspective. The same question for the Survival Sisters. And what's one thing that you would change about guns in the United States and why?
One thing that will change is I'll change. We should have more education on it, especially as kids, because I know everybody's like gun violence, this and that, but I think people really focus on the negative of guns and not the positive of it, because either way in the world, there are cruel people here and there's going to be violence either way. So even if they do take away guns, there's still going to be violence in the world. So I think at school they should have like just teach us the fundamentals. Like if you find a gun, first thing you do is try to avoid touching it. Keep your finger off the trigger. Make sure not to point it at anything. Don't play with it, because either way, when kids have curiosity about certain stuff, they're going to do it either way. So if we have certain things that we know about it and we know how to handle it, even if you try to keep guns away from your kids, they could go to your aunt's house, your grandma's house, their friend's house, and they could be playing with guns because they don't know anything about it. Like I know people who did that, and it's just like, it's really messed up because their parents kept that away from them. If they didn't have that curiosity, that could have never happened. But people try to avoid that just because it's gun violence. But either way, there's going to be violence. There's knives, there's forks, there's pencils, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Even your hands, they're weapons. Like everything can be a weapon. But if you have a certain understanding of just, you should teach your kids about it.
Right, backing off what she's saying, like if you putting, education about guns or firearms in schools and teaching kids, taking that curiosity away, it helps them, like, oh, I know this is a gun, I know the danger behind it, and I know not to do this. Like putting all the negative things towards guns, I mean, there's always gonna be bad people, and not just guns can hurt someone or cause damage to someone. There's other things as well besides a firearm.
And then another thing is, even if you tell your kid about it, then even if they have friends that do it on the phone with them or bring it to school or, do certain stuff, they can tell them like, you're not supposed to do that. That's not how you're supposed to handle it, because you never know. Like you're going to be around people, either if you avoid it or not, you're going to be around guns at one point in your life, and you have to know how to handle that.
Yes, and like, yes, you can, there's parents who want to keep their children safe and like keep them away from guns, but actually if you implement that into their lives and tell them like the danger behind it, that can help them like not like, touching it and using it in a bad way.
Thank you for that perspective. I think that is very interesting perspective to share with us. I appreciate you all being on the call and giving us all of your thoughts. So thank you to each of our panelists and as well as our committee members for participating in today's panel, bringing your story to others. In closing, what is one thing that you would want to make sure audience members take home from this presentation? And I wanted to start with Courtney. Do you want me to end with you, Courtney? I can end with you. Or
No, you can start with me. It's good.
Okay.
I had to scroll down on my notes.
Sorry.
I have myself last. So I want to, the final thing I want to impart is that over 90% of Americans agree that there should be background checks on every purchase. That's our main priority right now. And of course, that's what I'm gonna want to end on. But I also want to thank you all again for hosting this opportunity for an open dialogue. I think the chance to have a discussion and learn from each other is essential to making the changes we talked about today that will make communities safer.
Thank you very much. And Douglas, I'll go to you next.
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, everyone, for being on the panel. I've really enjoyed listening to everyone's perspective tonight. If there's one thing that I could get folks to take away from this discussion, actually, I'm going to say there too, and I'll keep it brief. One is that I want everybody to understand that the issue of gun violence in America, like it's a very complex issue. Like's been said before, there's no one size fits all solution. So we've really got to get into the minutia of what type of gun violence we're talking about, whether we're talking about accidental shootings, whether we're talking about homicides, we're talking about suicides. All of those incidents of gun violence, they come from different sources, right? So we have to be able to treat them as individual issues. So that's number one. Number two, I want people to understand that gun owners do want to reduce gun violence. In fact, if you talk to most gun owners, the whole reason why they own a firearm is because they recognize gun violence exists and they want to make sure that they're able to protect themselves and their family and their friends from it. So gun owners are very, very much invested in reducing and preventing all incidences of gun violence, be it accidental, be it homicide, being suicide. I think the one thing that gets caught up is that most gun owners are looking at gun violence reduction. They're not necessarily looking at a set of laws specifically around firearms, but are looking at some of those broader issues that influence what people do. So let's talk about what is motivating people into these type of actions. If we're talking about accidental deaths, obviously it's a level of ignorance that is there. People just not knowing, right? And having access that they probably shouldn't have. So we can address that with culture building. If we're talking about suicides, a lot of that has to do with, one is access and another has to do with just people not feeling that they have a way out, that there's not a better way or path for them. So we have to make sure that those folks are reached out to, that they understand there are people that care for them and that there is a better way. And when it comes to homicides, that can come from simple as people not caring about the sanctity of life of others, or it can come from people in desperate situations that just feel they don't have another option in order to get whatever it is that they're trying to get. In both of those cases, there are ways of addressing it, once again, through that culture building of making sure that people value that sanctity of life, making sure people aren't in those desperate situations first, making sure they have good conflict resolution tools, make sure they have good situations where to even avoid those situations in the first place. And then when it comes down to those that just really don't care about any of those around us, that's what we have folks like the police for, that will show up and that will deal with those individuals. And when the police aren't there, that's why we have the firearm, to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And I'll go with Charmaine next.
One thing securely. Keeping kids and community safe is something we all can agree on. We're all
Got you breaking up just a little bit still. It's like it knows when I'm going to call on you.
I'm sorry. The one takeaway is for everyone to just please store your guns securely. Keeping kids and community safe is something in the United States.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charmaine. Tamiko, you next. What's one thing you want to make sure audience members take home from this presentation?
Thank you for having me. And as I sat here and listened to the Survival Sisters, I love the way that they just impressed upon us the importance of education. The last funeral we had at my school, my community, was from a young man that was shot in his bedroom by his best friend because they were playing with a gun. So really, what I would want remembered is just to get educated and to get involved. It's important that you know, and that can go for this forum we're talking about right now, but whatever you are passionate about, just get educated on that and get involved, because we're not going to move this community or any of our communities in any positive direction if everyone sits back and watches the problem happen. It's going to take all of us being educated and being involved for us to move our communities forward. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Love it. LaTayla, what's one thing you want to make sure everyone goes home with?
What I really want everyone to go home with today is this. Gun violence prevention advocates are fighting and working towards the safety of everyone within every community from every background. We do not want to take away people's guns, nor do we want to infringe upon anyone's Second Amendment rights to own a firearm. We, like representatives from NAGA and the Survivor Sisters, want to educate, address, and reduce gun violence in America in an equitable and holistic way.
Sorry, very good. So well stated, LaTayla. Thank you so much. All right, and we'll end with Brooke and Kennedy.
One thing that we would like you guys to take home is to make sure you educate your kids and even your nieces and nephews. Just educate as many people as you can, because either way there's going to be violence, but there's better for you to prevent some bad thing happening to your child just because you want to keep something away from them. Educate them on the 4 mandatory safety gun rules. It's not that hard to learn, and just make sure that they know they're not supposed to touch it, but if they have to get away from their younger siblings or something, or even protect themselves, if you're not home or something, that they can do that instead of keeping it away from them.
Also, when it comes to firearms, like, stop thinking about the negative things of firearms and look at the positive things, because if you always think of the negative things, yes, someone always want to do the negative instead of the positive things. And when it comes to firearms, everything is not negative. Like, protection comes with it, and a lot of sports and other things come with firearms, such as hunting, tactical games, and just overall protection.
But
You froze right after you said hunting.
oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
But
Hunting, tactical games, anything, like, it come and firearms can provide many things, such as food on the table. Like, just start trying to look at positive things when it comes to firearms as well, instead of the negative all the time.
But if you also take away firearms, that's how some people feed their family. Some people's dads and moms, they go out there and they hunt turkeys and deer, all that stuff, just to feed their family. That's the only way that they can feed their family. So if you take away firearms, either way there's still going to be violence in the world, because if you think about it, your hands are weapons, butter knives are weapons. They can't take away everything, but you have to have an understanding on safety about it, so we can prevent that as much as we can.
We'll start with you real quick. I just want to make sure we let people know how to follow any one of your organizations. So Survival Sisters, let people know how they can follow you.
The Survival Sisters on YouTube, The Survival Sisters on Facebook, Survival Sisters 3 on Instagram, and our merch is thesurvivalsisters.bigcartel.com.
All right, thank you, ladies. I appreciate that. Taylor, would you like to let us know how to get involved with Students Demand Action?
You can follow us at Students Demand on Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok.
Wonderful. Tamiko, would you like to let us know how to follow your organization?
I'm gonna
I'll piggyback
slide that over to Douglas.
I meant to do that too, sorry. It's the order that you guys are on the screen. That's what's happening.
Gotcha. No
Go ahead.
He's our
problem.
VP, hey.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that.
So for NAGA, if anyone is interested in joining National African American Gun Association or just seeing what we're up to and what we're doing, you can go to our website, www.naaga.co. That's where you can join, and you can also find a list of our chapters across the country where you can reach out to get involved with them on the local level. We're also on all your major social media. We are on Instagram and Twitter as NAGA National, NAAGA National. We're also on YouTube as well, and on Facebook at National African American Gun Association.
Thank you very much. And Courtney, can you let us know how we can get involved with Moms Demand Action?
Of course. So on the web, we're momsdemandaction.org. I also want to share, again, besmartforkids.org, all spelled out. We're on all social media as @momsdemand, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I don't think we have YouTube, do we, Charmaine? And then you can also Google the Everytown Survivor Network.
You're gonna have YouTube after
Survivors
this,
can- Oh, right. That's right. Tag us.
right? All right, well, thank you all so much. I just want to make sure, I know I mentioned it before we started recording, but Latayla and Charmaine, you guys being here is just such, you're so brave. And I just want to thank you for your courage. You know, if I was in one of your positions, you know, I would have a whole lot of hard anger. And I'm glad that you were able to turn that anger and that hurt into advocacy. And I think that that's really powerful to do that. And I'm glad that you were a part of this program this evening. I look forward to having continued discussions with you all in the future. I think that you were all able to give a lot of good education to our communities, and we want to make sure we share that with as many people as possible. Go ahead, Douglas.
Sorry, I forgot. I left out one last thing. If you
No
want to go and get more information on our firearms, safe storage of firearms and vehicles campaign, you can either go to Google and type in "Protect What Protects You." That'll bring up a lot of different posts, or you can go directly to the website, firearmssecurityalliance.com, firearmssecurityalliance.com. And that'll take you to the various PSA messages, which you also have on YouTube as well as the social media posts regarding facts about firearms theft from cars and options that you can take to make sure you properly secure that firearm.
Thank you so much. And we can go ahead and stop recording. Still got my little